Welcome, everyone. You are tuning into Engaging Walk. My name is Drake.
And my name is Rubie.
We believe in the power of walking together and talking together.
It's a simple act to stay connected, and movement is key.
This week, we will discuss understanding your partner's calling and how you can see them for who they truly are.
And how you and your significant other can take this time to make deep connections.
Okay, so this time we did our Engaging Walk over in the Mission Valley Trails.
Yes.
It's in San Diego. It's like central northwest. Northeast. And it's
east.
And it's a really beautiful area. We took our dog Boba for a walk there, or for a hike. It was like a 3-mile hike.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty hot.
Yeah.
But, we made it. We
Yep.
got home, and we kind of crashed.
Yeah, she collapsed after that. But she did a good job. That's her first hike ever. So she did a good job. Yes.
So we want to thank you guys for tuning in. We got some new listeners, I think from Wisconsin, London, Florida.
London?
London, England.
Sweet.
UK. Got some Brits in the house, the tea and whatnot. And then we got some new listeners over in, I think it was Florida, and I think other parts of California. So welcome to the podcast. Also got some listeners from when I post the RSS feed over to YouTube. Thank you guys for tuning in. We love you guys. We super happy to have you guys on listening with us and gaining new perspectives on healthy relationships, healthy marriages, and what it takes to put in that work.
Yeah.
So, Rubie, you want to kick us off and let the listeners know what we're going to be talking about today?
Sure. So we discussed about, understanding your partner's calling and see them truly at who they are. So it's very powerful to understand your partner's calling. So before understanding your partner's calling, I think it's the important things that, like, do I know my calling? It's better to, I don't want to say it's better, but like it's good to know my calling before somebody else help me to see it. So as for me, I think for me it's a journey to recognize it, and maybe later you can share your story. So I just focus on study, and until like I read a book called The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren, and it's the very last page of the book is that, like, do you know your calling, your purpose, your purpose that driven your life. So at that age, I think I was sophomore in the college, and I studied business administration, and so I halfway there. But then I asked a question, and I prayed to God and say, okay, so since you are my creator, you create me. So instead of I trying to find it out, I can do it, or it's going to take a long time, and
For sure.
So as I thought about that question, and throughout the period of 6 months, I slowly aware that, hey, I love working with children. I find it so rewarding, and I love teaching, which is very odd if you know me, because that is two things that I still remember today. Like, I sat in that first grade, and I told myself, like, I hate to be a teacher, and it's so boring, and I don't like children. So for me to say, like, hey, I think I want to be a teacher to teach kindergarten or elementary, that was a miracle. So,
Yeah, for sure.
so anyway, so I knew that is not for me. And something has changed when I asked that question. So from that moment, I have to make, like, I just shift my life into become an educator to teach children. What about you, Drake?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to, like, it could take you a long time to figure out what you're supposed to do. Like, even if you're kind of like aware of your calling early, it can take years and years and years for it to manifest. And I guess that's like sort of my case, where I think I knew when I was very young, probably around like the age of 8 or 9, that I wanted to play music because back then my cousin had a DJ set, and in my neighborhood mostly, people listen to like rap, hip hop, and R&B. So, people playing musical instruments like guitar, bass guitar, drums, like that wasn't really like a thing. I didn't really know anybody that did that. But my cousin had a DJ set, and then I asked my mom, I was like, "Hey mom, can I get a DJ set?" And she was like, "No." And I was like, "Okay, well, I guess I'm not getting a DJ set." But I try to learn from him. I try to like work on his set as much as I could. But I think it was probably like a year later when I noticed that like I really kind of liked, rock music, which wasn't really that typical in my neighborhood, like I was saying. So it took me a little while to come to terms with that, to acknowledge within myself, like, hey, yeah, this is music that I actually like. And then saw Jimi Hendrix play guitar on the TV, and then I was like, hey, Mom, I didn't know that, like, black people played the guitar, and she was like, yeah, they do. Like, like, what a weird thing to say. Like, of course they do. And I was like, well, I never seen it. I'd only seen, like, hip hop and things like that. And she was like, no, that's not how the real world works. Like, if you want a guitar, I can get you a guitar. And she was like way more open to that. A little background on my mom is she's Greek, and like there's the bouzouki is an instrument that is guitar like. So she was like, yeah, you can totally get a guitar. So that was like sort of like where it took off. So I've been playing ever since. So that's a little over like 25 years ago, or like about that. And but it took a long time for that to manifest into like a career. And but yeah, so have had to do other things to sustain myself. But that has always been my calling, is to play music and to do that, which is what I love. But it can be pretty difficult to make that a living wage, a living career doing that art. So, but yeah, definitely knowing that, like, hey, like, let's say if your spouse is an avid rock climber and they love rock climbing, and they love going out on trips with their friends, and you're not a rock climber, you have zero athletic ability. That doesn't mean that like you and your spouse, or like you and your significant other, can't maintain a healthy relationship.
That's true.
Because Rubie doesn't play music. Like she plays keyboard, but she doesn't play in bands and things like that.
No,
like she just kind of does it on her own.
Yeah.
Which is great, which is healthy. But she's not like, hey, since we don't really do that together, that's not something that I really want you to do.
And actually, I did ask you the questions like, hey, is it important to you that like your wife or your spouse, do that with you? Do you find it like important as a connection? And you said no. I didn't expect that. So, asking that question is also clear out the expectation.
Yeah, I think connection in terms of like love and marriage goes beyond just what your calling is and what you do. It's a soul connection. It's a love connection, and expecting somebody to have the same exact interests and the same exact calling that you have is, I believe, not realistic.
Yeah,
you can work in different fields. You can have different things that you do that is your calling, and then you can actually kind of just have a different perspective from another person and talk to them about it. Like, they're not going to know like every little piece of jargon of what you're talking about, or maybe they will after a certain number of years of you like telling them like, hey, this is what's going on, this is what's happening. But Rubie and I routinely talk about what's been going on in my music. And although she's not a musician, like to the degree that like she's playing in bands and, making albums and things like that, she still has her inputs, which are extremely valuable.
Yeah. And I think, like sharing or like intentional getting to know your partner's calling, and that makes a big difference because like I don't have very deep background about music, but I can tell like, okay, this sounds good, this doesn't sound good. And and also like for Drake, I mean, like you work with students before, so you have a little bit background of teaching. But then he can share a little bit input here and there, also helping me in terms of my daily class. And so I think be intentional, you know goes a long way. And just knowing that my partner wants to know my calling, that's so rewarding. And so yeah, I think for that question, like, do I have to have the same calling with with my spouse or my partner? I don't think that necessary, because it's great to do things together, but is still powerful and encouraging, and to do different direction. Like even now, like I focus on education, and I focus with working with children, and that's what we do at church too. Like he plays guitar and drums in the team, but I'm not there. I'm not even close. I will like sing and dance in the audience, or with the crowd, but I will be busy running.
Yeah, Rubie brings a lot of fire every Sunday.
For for the children. So do I miss him not being there? No, I'm busy. I on fire. I'm so passionate, teaching, sharing, that's fuel me. And then what fuel him is to serve God with, instruments. So, so when should I get to know, what is our next question is, when should I get to know my partner's calling?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think first I wanted to just talk a little bit about that that last idea, because it's really important that you celebrate your partner's calling, that you give them the respect and the space to go about it the way that they see themselves. You give your input, like, hey, I think that this was great. I think that you work on that. But ultimately, what you really need to provide is support.
Yeah.
Support,
For sure.
love, understanding, and a conversation about like how your partner is progressing in like what their calling is, and understanding it, knowing more about it if you don't know too much about that topic.
Yeah.
But ultimately providing them that support, and understanding that like, hey, this is what they love to do with their life, and I love them, and that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to give them, my support, whatever they need to make their dreams come true, and to make sure that they're living a fulfilled life, and not like bypassing them or steering them off their path. You always give that like input, like, hey, I think that this worked well, that didn't work well, but ultimately you have to let them make their decisions, and let them decide like what's good, like to pursue their dreams.
Yeah.
Because these might be dreams that they've had since they were like 2, 5, 3 years old. You never know. Like long before you were ever in the picture.
Yeah.
And then also like Rubie was talking about, like this might be like hopefully this is like their path that was like, God was like, hey, I need you to do something for me. And you don't want to interfere with that, but so ideally you'd want to know about like what your partner's calling is as soon as possible.
Yeah.
You could probably get a good glimpse of like, hey, this person works in finance. They don't really love their job. They love backgammon or whatever it is that they love to do.
Yeah.
Those two things might not sync up. In Rubie's case, they totally sync up. That's what she's passionate about.
Yeah.
And that's what she does, which is wonderful.
That was a blessing, yes.
But not all the times that's going to be the case. So you get to know your partner and be like, hey, okay, I understand that's where you work, but is that where your heart is? Is that where you've been called to do? They might say, no, this, what I really love to do is, play chess. Whatever it might be. And I think once you get to know the person long enough, and you can encourage them. I think that's probably the best way that you could really connect with your partner is like, hey, I know that you're working in finance and I know that you've got this great career, but you really love chess, and let's make that more of your thing. I'd love to go support you and go do tournaments. I'd love to go support you, and maybe you do a YouTube channel where you talk about your love for chess, something like that,
And
or do a chess podcast.
And I remember that, the very beginning of our recent relationship, I think Drake told me, because I took him to the church and like, hey, just want to let you know my community, and he he just straight up told me right after that, it's like, hey Ruby, if you were looking for a preacher, I'm not. I am not. And I'm glad that he was very clear about, his calling and, he comfortable and confident about, his passion, because it's make it easier for me to like, okay, accept that, understand that, and discover that with him. To be honest, I want to have someone like, preacher, because I don't know. I think I think because I'm a teacher, so I like someone to debate back and forth. But then I was like, oh yeah, if he, I'm passionate. If someone know what they want in their life, it's so powerful.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely more powerful when you know exactly who you are, who you're called to be, and what your strengths are. And even within that, you might find new things about that strength. So, for example, for me with music, I learned just in the last few years that not only is my calling towards music, but my calling is towards leadership in music. That for the longest time, I was kind of always the second wing person, or the person that kind of did the supporting role. And then those bands kind of fell apart. But ever since I've been kind of leading the bands and taking control and being like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. Things have been a lot more productive, and a lot more things get accomplished. Music gets done, published, all that kind of stuff. And that's a great feeling, not just for me, but for the other people that are surrounding by that are working with me. And they're like, hey, you know what? This guy, he's calling the shots, but things get done.
Yeah.
The music's done, the music's published. We have shows, we have this, we have that.
Yeah.
And that is a new level of calling that I think comes to play once you accept it.
Yeah.
So, for example, even being a teacher, your calling doesn't stop there. That's there's always levels to it. So being within that, you could be an educator of educators. You can be so many different things within that field.
Yeah.
And,
so it's good to know your partner's calling as soon as possible, because then you can ask yourself do I see myself like that in the picture? Because that's the same questions I have to ask myself. Do I see myself for supporting Drake's calling and dreams? And I say yeah. And one thing that stood out for me from Drake is that when I share my passion and my calling for my life, he was like, Ruby, whatever you want to do, I support you. And for me, I was like, no, you're supposed to tell me what to do. Or not tell me what to do, but give me more feedback. I said, no, I want to support you. And I love that, because now looking back, he gave me back being powerful. Ruby, you get to be powerful, and I'm right here along your journey and support you. And I think that is powerful, to have a partner like that, instead of want to change every direction that I do. So let's jump into the next one, the importance of seeing your partner's calling. Why is it so important?
Well, it's important because some of the things that we touched on is the lack. So, for example, if you're not seeing your partner's calling, or if you see them in a way that they are not, then there's going to be conflict. Without a doubt, there's going to be conflict.
Yeah, for sure.
It might take a year. It might take a couple of weeks, a year, a decade, but that conflict's going to pop up. I know in a lot of cases, I'm not going to say names, but this used to be the case back when, the previous generation. That I know a lot of people from that era were like, "Hey, I wanted to go to college, but my husband or my dad wouldn't let me," or "I wanted to do this with my life, but I didn't get to do that because of X, Y, and Z." Sometimes circumstances happen, but sometimes it happens because people in our lives are like, "We don't want you to do that. We want you to do this instead."
Yeah.
And this can happen, I think, a lot in
Asian
and
Asian
in
families.
Eastern European cultures where they're like, "Yeah, you want to be a painter? That's cool. You're not going to do that. You're going to do
You're
this
gonna be
instead.
a doctor.
You're
going to
be a banker." Like, I have a cousin that owns a bank, and you're going to work for him. So there's plenty of that, and I think just ultimately it leads to regret. It leads to a life of wish I coulda, shoulda, woulda. But that's, for like my example, I have a career in the military, but I'm very upfront with that. That's not my calling. That's not my passion, but that is how I sustain myself, my family, and there's nothing to be ashamed about with that. And actually, I'm glad that I did do that route to provide myself and my family more security, and more opportunities down the road. So there's
and then
always
also
that.
work on my on my end because I'm passionate about military. Every time I walk, I enter the base like yeah. Or every time I
Rubie loves it.
see blue angels in the sky, I'm like so powerful. The sounds of freedom.
Yeah,
But
and that's not to say that I'm totally disconnected. It's just, it's not. It doesn't get me like I think a person told me this. This is probably the best way for me to think about it. At least is, if you didn't have to work, what would you do? So if you had the money, if you had everything that you needed, you didn't have to work, what would you be doing with your life? And for me, it'd be playing music. I'd get as much music gear as I could, lock myself in a room, and do all sorts of fun stuff with like the different instruments. If I didn't have to worry about anything else. So I think seeing the important, that is really important to see your partner's calling. That's a chunk of their life that they had before you came to the picture. And they might have gone like down a different path, but you can always bring them back and be like, "Hey," and they're gonna love you for that. Like, "Oh yeah, me being able to pursue my dreams was because my wife saw how passionate I was about, for example, fixing cars, and she was like, 'Hey, I know you're working, at the New York Stock Exchange, but fixing cars is what you love to do. Maybe you want to do that on the side and then turn that into your thing eventually when you find it a way to do that is as profitable as, working at the stock market.'"
And I think another important of seeing your partner's calling is that like when I'm down, when I'm not that confident or when I'm unclear about my direction in my career, having a partner knowing my calling and my strength in that calling, it will confirm or remind me, where I'm supposed to head to. For example, I, struggling with the test and I failed it, which just happened recently, and it's really like bummed me. And
It's the California
thing.
teacher's test.
Yeah. So, and I tried my best. I did. But then, like I was like, whatever, I don't want to go through that any hoops. But then Drake said like, "Hey, you know what? I support you. Whatever that you decide, but it's worth it because you're almost there." And he remind me the dreams, the passion, the things that I have shared with him, and he called me back to that standard. And like, hey, this is who you are. This is, I believe in you and you can do it. But hey, decisions is still, in your hands, and you get to choose, to be powerful. So I think it's not easy, to be in that spot. But I think like having someone to support you and to call you back to the dreams that you have, it is so rewarding. It is so good, and then so you don't have to have the same dreams. You don't have to have the same target, but I mean, it's good to have it, but then you don't. And so, as I observed Drake progressively to grow within his career, to grow within his passion, is I can tell him like, hey, I aware that you grow in this, and you done a great job in maneuver in these challenging, but hey, you walk through it. You didn't shy away from it, but you face it.
Yeah.
And hearing that from your partner is very strengthen the relationship and trust, and it just that you have someone's have your back, and they there to cheer you on. So I think that's powerful as a couple to have that.
Yeah, for sure. I think going back to that situation, we had like good news with Rubie's test, and then bad news.
Like, oh no.
And it was like literally like the last of her tests, and it was like the margin of like her not passing was so small. But what I immediately thought of was all the times that I'd come home and she's studying, going to sleep and she's studying, falling asleep literally on her iPad, and she's studying, and then we got her like a new like what man. This guy, he's really, really good. This guy's super knowledgeable, and he goes through like the California test, and we call him what man because he talks with like that Texas, like he says like cool whip, like that kind of thing. Anyway, she's learning so much from him and watching his videos and going over the tests and all that, or like going over like what she expects to be on the test. And I just told her, I was like, hey, look, babe, I'm proud of you. You studied so much and you worked really hard, and this outcome of you not passing, it's irrelevant. You really worked hard on it, and I'm proud of you, and you should be proud of yourself because you really did work hard. And yeah, and I thought to myself, like, I want to see her succeed. I want to see her pass. Even if she doesn't do anything with the license, I still want her to have that sense of accomplishment. Like, it's done. I went out and sought something and finished it. But at the end of the day, no one can force her to go through with that if her heart's not in it anymore. And I'd understand if it wasn't, because it's a lot of effort. But it's like I told her, like, either way, I support what she wants to do. Mm-hmm. And I shared with her my failure that was pretty similar with the law school admissions test, where
remember that
where I studied like the whole summer. Like, I was like, it just hit me. I was like, maybe I should go to law school. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. I would have such a great career as a lawyer. And it was like the summer that I was going in between like graduating. I think I graduated in the fall. So yeah, it was like the summer going into the fall where I was going to graduate. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna study for this test. And I studied and studied and studied, and then I got like a very, very low score. And luckily, like, not many people in my family were like eager to know about it, so I was able to just like kind of just put the test off to the side, and then I decided to never redo it again. But
I mean, at least you try.
Yeah, but I studied really, really hard for that. Mm-hmm. But I didn't do so well, and it is what it is. Sometimes it happens like that.
Yeah. So I think for me, just to have to look into that, like, hey, this is another opportunity for me to know the knowledge deeper. So, so it's okay.
Yeah.
But
You go into this week's assignment?
Sure. So for this week assignment, discover with your spouse or your partner or your girlfriend, boyfriend about their calling, and then how do you look at their calling? How do you see a different angle of this strength?
Yeah. So for example, like you might see like your partner as like, hey, you're gonna be an amazing politician, and then your partner's like, what? I never even considered that. Something like that. Like you tell them like, hey, this is what I see in you, and then you tell your significant other like, hey, this is what I think my calling is, and see if there's any discrepancy, if there's any, or if they're aligned.
Especially like to just get to know like what they are passionate about, like what make them come alive, and then and how you can support the person along the way.
Okay, well, so with that, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. We hope that you can take our engaging walk and make it your own.
So stay tuned for next week's episode, and when we will discuss about the power of intimacy.
So don't forget to click the follow button if you're watching on, or if you're listening on Spotify. Subscribe if you're listening on YouTube or anywhere else. Give us a like. And with that, this is Drake.
And it's Rubie.
With Engaging Walk, and we are signing out.
Bye.